So here I am at a Windows box at a kind of total loss. What do you need to do to bring this up? Okay, I got you on Control L. Closing yours. Okay. That's really better. So does that work? No, I think I see it down here. Okay. So last night, Barbara and Larry and I got together, and we were kind of talking about how we're going to start off our presentations. And through this, I'm convinced that engineers just do not have good senses of humor. So I was waiting for Larry to give, to basically provide a joke, say, here's Mark, or something like that. But it just didn't happen. And you guys aren't laughing either, so I think I'll stop. So what I'm going to do, and hopefully this is something that we're going to be doing for a while, is kind of give you kind of a brief update on what's going on within ARIN. And ARIN, as you know, is actually your organization, and it's something that you can impact. And we're really here to serve you. And one of the things that we want to do is say, okay, here are the things we're doing. Are these the right things to do? And what you want us to do as an organization. Okay, here's a fairly sort of impressive number. Whoops. The Whois query load. Whois has increased pretty much kind of like the rest of the internet, and I'm proud to say that our machines are actually keeping up with the load, no problem. This turns out to be about 70 queries per second, which I used to work for VeriSign, and this is a really small number compared to VeriSign, but still this is not too bad. The next slide, when it comes up, it's much different. This is the routing registry query load for its Whois server. And I know that there's this kind of like whole idea of going green, and I'm kind of considering whether or not we should replace this box with one of these low power devices and basically generate electricity with gerbils. Because this box is unbelievable. I think it gets like a query every 4 minutes or something like that. Along with the routing registry, one of the things that we looked at is the origin ASs in both the routing registry and what was in Whois. And many of you know, but for you who don't, one of the things that ARIN recently implemented is the ability for you to also, as you reassign your networks, that you can also put the origin AS as part of it. And you can see that on the second row here, the origin found, that 90% of the origins found in Whois turned out to be correct, which is really cool. But in the IRR, it's a little bit less than that, actually quite a bit less than that. So as I mentioned earlier, we're talking about gerbils powering it. I'm thinking about them actually selecting the right sort of response and giving it back and see what happens. So they might be able to get up to that sort of error rate as well. You can see that the IRR is also a little bit behind on origins actually being absolutely incorrect. It's at 28%, whereas Whois is at 9%, and there's 7% of the routes not found in the IRR, but only 1% not found in Whois. One of the things that's kind of interesting is over the last year, ARIN has been trying to work with the people who have legacy addresses, people who received their allocations before ARIN was there, but now ARIN actually holds and maintains their records. And we now have a facility to allow them to be really kind of a part of the community. And I sat down with Leslie a little bit this morning and said, okay, we've got 127 requests, cool. 78 are signed, 39 are pending. What's this deal about this 10 that are not required? And these were either people who didn't realize that they have already signed RSA, or were trying to get away with something kind of sneaky and say, well, I really don't have that space, but let me put in an RSA for it anyhow and see if I can get it. So we were able to catch them. And you can see here below that 81 of them were actually sent via the web, and 46 via transfer requests. 4-byte ASNs. Who remembers the talk that Jeff Houston gave about 2 years ago at NANOG talking about the run out of 2-byte ASNs? So this is coming, and there's now a facility put in place to basically do the same thing we're doing with V6, with the equivalent thing we're doing with V6 on V4. We now have 4-byte ASNs, gives us 4 billion entry ASNs as opposed to 65,000. If we've had 126 requests, 108 of those have come back and said, hey, my upstream doesn't support 4-byte ASNs, and I can't do it. So they've been changed and to 2-byte requests. Out of the 18 that were actually issued, 12 of those exchanged for 2-byte ASNs, and we have 6 currently registered. So, and this has been around for a little while. So this is something as a community that we need to look at a little bit more closely to see how we can start getting this out in the real world a little bit better. And if you can see, here's the sort of the topology of the 4-byte ASNs across all the regions. And ARIN has 6, AFRINIC has 4, LACNIC has 1, RIPE NCC has 15, and APNIC has 11. Here's an interesting slide that talks about, okay, if you give out IP address space, who would you give it out? What types of organizations did you give it out to? And ARIN has really 4 buckets of different types of organizations. There's the extra large organizations, and they got 83% of the space. There's large organizations, and they got almost 7% of the space. There's 1,088 small organizations who got 9% of the space, and 823 extra small organizations, and they got 1% of the space over 2006 and 2007. And here's the stats that are broken down by CIDR prefix, what we've given out. And you can see a majority of the space that's been issued has been on the, at least in terms, not so much on the space, but in terms of the number of allocations given out, that most of them were kind of gravitating from the /19 to the /22 realm, which makes perfect sense. And that's a large part based on the multi-homing policy that's been put in place.
Joel Yegley, sorry. A /11 plus, is that a /10? Or what's?
Yeah, that should probably be a /10.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, out of the space that was given, here are the number of organizations that have received space within the North American region that ARIN serves. 184 organizations received some sort of resource from ARIN, almost 2,500 in the United States and 34 in the Caribbean. And we kind of forget about the Caribbean from time to time, so we thought it'd be good to actually sort of break it out by the islands and who has space. And this is actually something that we're spending a little bit more time with, is the folks down in the Caribbean, since they are part of the region, a part of it. LACNIC is also dealing with the number of islands down there. And you can see that there's some activity that's going on down in the Latin American region. And this is something that's actually quite interesting and good to see. Now, on IPv4 requests and approvals, it's actually fairly flat from year to year in terms of number of requests. What's kind of interesting about it that is the number of approvals the percentage of approvals that are approved, the number of requests that are actually approved actually has increased over time. And it's gone from 53%, almost half in the 05-06 period, to almost 2/3 actually over 2/3 in the 07-08 period. So I guess you guys are getting better at sending in your requests and rationale. On V6 space, actually this is great to see. One of the things that ARIN has been doing for a couple years now is saying, hey look, IPv4 space is, the free pool is running out, and we need to start thinking about transitioning over to V6. And based on these numbers, more people seem to be interested in getting space and seeing what they can do with it. And there has been IPv6 experiments all over the place, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the future. But I think these sort of evangelistic sort of activities we have going on is a good thing. Go ahead, Dave.
Dave Meyer. So I'm working on a project called Lisp, or whatever that is. You guys we can talk about that later. But I wanted to get an IPv6 prefix, experimental prefix, right? And I said, well, hey, I need a /32, and I talked to the people at ARIN, and they said, sure, it'll cost you $500 a year. And I thought, wow, it must be a supply-demand problem. What, are we out of /32s already? That's why they're expensive, or what's? I mean, I found that kind of odd, you know, especially in the case where, like you were just saying, for experimental purposes, and that you want people to go out and use IPv6, right?
Uh-huh.
So, you know, it's maybe an editorial comment, but I just found it odd that for experimental use, the cost was so high, and that's the ongoing annual cost, and I was told that I would have to re-justify it annually. So, I don't know if you have any comment on that, but I found that a little bit unusual, especially since we're trying to get people to go to IPv6.
Okay. Leslie, would you like to say something about that?
So the fee schedule is set by the community. It's not set by ARIN. If you want it changed, please come to a meeting and let the board know. That's really the story on that. And what was the second? I'm sorry, Dave. What did you say? To re-justify, yeah. The policy, again, policy set by the community. The policy states specifically that it's a one-year term for the experimental, and you have to re-justify at the end of 1 year. So.
Okay, great, thanks. Keep those questions coming. So one of the things that we've done is, so I've been at ARIN now for about 7 months, and one of the things that we're trying to do is trying to overhaul the systems over there, and have been working really hard on, first of all, modernizing things. A lot of the equipment that was there was like 10 years old, and actually some of the code that was in there is code that I wrote like 15 years ago. So a lot of this stuff, we're actually modernizing it and moving away from templates to being more web-based to help you all out as a community. The project, it's been named Project X, for lack of a better word, and this is our web-based sort of activity. We're looking to but actually have the first part of this coming up over the summer period, so that you'll be able to see some of this work actually coming out and start moving some of the stuff that may be kind of awkward using templates and being able to do this stuff via the web if you so choose.
Rüdiger Volk. Mark, does moving away mean you will not support the old stuff?
We're supporting the old stuff for a while. I hope that we can actually, and this is all work in progress, but I hope that we can come up with a better sort of solution than using templates in the future.
Do you think just strictly interactive will be sufficient
No.
and fine, or
No.
are you going something like web services or something similar awful?
Yeah, this is all dependent on what the members want, but I would, and who knows, maybe it may go back to, maybe templates might be the most sufficient sort of thing, but I'd like to go to a more sort of secure sort of system to make this available, and using tools that people find fairly easy to use, as opposed to, you got to get this X.509 certificate from ARIN, and you got to make it all this stuff go. By the way, we have like 5 people who got X.509 certificates from us over the last 3 years. So I guess that's kind of a little bit too hard. But on the other hand, we need to make the system more secure. And actually, that's the next thing I'm talking about is resource certification. And as we start raising the bar for people to actually doing route validation, we also need to make sure that all the weakest links are taken care of. And what I hate to have, or what I prefer not to have happen, is that the registration services component of this become the weakest link, either because the services that they offer are not sufficiently secure or too hard. So this is something that we're looking to actually do. So let's go on to resource certification. This is something that's also come up over the last couple of NANOGs. In fact, I think that Danny is going to be talking about this again here later today. In terms of, okay, how can we better secure our routing environment? And there's been work that's been underway within ITF called Secure Inter-Domain Routing. And one of the things that's trying to do is put trust into network resources and bootstrap some sort of route validation. And so what this means is as you receive routes, you can actually validate these things offline, or maybe someday someone will come up with something that's fast enough that you can actually validate online. We'll see. But anyways, the first part of that is actually coming up with a sort of distribution mechanism to make that happen that makes sense. And this is work that's been done under contract with Randy Bush in Internet Software Consortium. The code that's you can look at this code anytime you want. In fact, it's available at the URL that's at the bottom of the screen at Rob Austin's site. You can see where we are and what's going on there within the resource certification arena. There's some fairly good documentation if you're interested in looking at, and I can see that the URL is kind of messed up. So don't click on that right as it is. I think you know what to do. But there's a fairly good site at APNIC that actually describes this in pretty good detail.
On the resource certification, do you have some prediction at which point in time you will actually allow your members to do certificates, and when actually ROAs will be stored?
That's a good question. So we have it in our plans to have this code that Randy and Rob have put out that I just mentioned available by the end of the year. And it may be not as pretty as it should be, but at least we'll have it up in a sort of a pilot environment. So it's something that you guys can play with. And I know this is big within RIPE, within your region, as well as APNIC. So this is, I think this is going to be a good thing to see, and I'm sure you're going to hear more about it in the future. So other things that we've been doing is making a big push on IPv6 and trying to get as many of you to start experimenting with this stuff as you can. There was a big push at the last NANOG. There was a big push at the ARIN meeting. There's been a big push at all the regional registries meetings. We did the IPv6 experiment thing at the last ARIN meeting. And the thing that was kind of different about that compared to here is that most people actually raised their hands and said, yes, we're the ones that were in the room participated, and they asked a lot of questions. And we found a number of different bugs in operating systems, and things actually, unfortunately, were graded in like a Mac OS X on making v6 more transparent. And it was really great to see. And hopefully these things can actually be moved on into a wider audience, not just NANOG and ARIN, but in other audiences and other venues as well, so we can actually push this even a little bit harder. So one of the things that this is all kind of foreshadowing, and there's going to be more to come, but look at Project X and resource certification. There's probably going to be more, detail coming out about this pretty soon. And I really don't want to talk about it until we really have something available for you guys to actually start to push and play with as well. So I'm going to kind of hold off from my natural sort of tendency to say, okay, here it is. This is really cool stuff. Go ahead and start looking at it. Excuse me, when it's not really there yet. So, but that is coming soon. So thank you very much.
Hi. One question, Danny McPherson. I was just wondering, Mark, On the Origin AS stuff, are you guys, do you have intentions of going back and populating that to associate those Origin ASs with existing prefixes? Because I know that's a voluntary thing now, right?
It's still voluntary. I guess that would be a good thing to put in the suggestion process if we wanted to do something a little bit different.
Right, I mean,
But right now, we're basically, we're using internal version of route views to actually validate the Origin AS, or check the Origin AS against what we have in either our IRR or within our WHOIS service.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, on exactly the same issue, I suggest that we have a little bit of technical discussion on, well, okay, we are expecting that the RPKI certified routing data will be made available to the RPSL world, and actually very much the same ideas can be applied to your Origin thing. And I think it makes a lot of sense to actually have kind of unified view how to get the best out of it all.
Yeah, kind of referencing a little bit what Rudiger's talking about, there's also sort of a movement underfoot to actually put some security information on RPSL. And so this is all somewhat controversial, and it's all kind of in a very much a embryonic stage right now. So, but there's obviously there's a lot of thought being put into this and trying to figure out how it should best be. And I'm sure that the various regional registries will come up with some sort of cohesive solution that will make sense. But I'm not sure what it is right now because it's very much in the evolutionary stage. So, well, thank you very much.